Okay, I don't know where to put this. All right, hello everyone. We're going to be talking about how Babel works. And just for this title slide, we're hiring. Looking for anyone around the world. You don't get paid anything right now, but it's priceless, right? So I'm going to talk about how does Babel work and what does that really mean. At first, I was going to just talk about the technical part of Babel, but I want to go into how does it work as an open source project and how does it fit into the JavaScript community. So first, what's a compiler? For most people, it's magic. Some people, you might think it's something that turns a high-level language into a low-level language. And for Babel, it turns JavaScript into JavaScript. It's like, why would you want to do that? So how is Babel a compiler? The way we want to do that is to create this JSX transform. And I'm sure most people know about how it gets transformed by just checking out the REPL, because no one actually reads the output, right? So I'm Henry. I work at Behance, which is part of Adobe in New York. And I've been maintaining Babel for about 2 years now. So before we talk about the JSX transform, we should talk about what's JSX. And I'm going to ask Jason to help me with that. And I just took his slide from one of his presentations. It's an XML-like expression, and it's compiled into a function. We take the tag name like div, make it the first parameter. All of our attributes turn into an object as the second parameter, and the rest of the parameters are the children. So all we're trying to do is transform this kind of one-to-one mapping between JSX and this function. And so what's Babel? If we ask Dan, Babel is the new jQuery. What does that mean, though? Ken puts it well. Babel is to JavaScript as jQuery is to HTML. Babel helps you manipulate the AST like jQuery helps you manipulate the DOM. And so what's an AST? An AST is an abstract syntax tree. Lots of fancy words. So Babel as a compiler, what it does is the parser, it takes a string and it turns it into an AST. And you can think of an AST as just a piece of JSON. So if you have this variable h, then it turns into this object with a type and a property with h. And the next step of Babel is the transformer. So those are all the presets and plugins that everyone uses. In this case, we want to turn JSX into a function call. So one example of a transformation, maybe you want to turn h into the rocket ship emoji. So you just change the name parameter. And the last step is the generator. It takes the AST, that JSON, and turns it back into a string. And just going back from, that JSON to a string. So in the end, Babel is just a tool to help you manipulate an AST structure. And now I'm going to show you this tool by Felix. It's called AST Explorer. And I'll go into how you can write a plugin. Okay. So if you go to astexplorer.net, I'm just going to skip that. So if you load the website, zoom in. Okay, not responsive. The left side is the code that you want to, your input code, and then the right side is the AST structure. So here, if we highlight this 1, then we can see that it's a numeric literal with the value of 1. If you go to this string, it's a string literal. If you go to this a variable, it's an identifier. You don't have to memorize all the different nodes and what their names are. You can just type it in and figure out what the node name is and all the properties. So if you want to get to a function, there's a function declaration node. If I go highlight over this a, there's an identifier here. And so on. And And so what can you do with ASTs? What can you do with the Babel plugin? One thing you can do, it's kind of boring. You can make new JavaScript syntax and compile it down to ES5. So one example is this exponentiation operator. And we can turn that into math.how. You can do what Michael was talking about yesterday and change the imports into a different URL, or it could be a little bit more related to this conference. You can turn JSX into these function calls. But you can do more fun things. So say I want to turn all of the cloud identifiers to but. You can do path.name, path.node. There's a name, and we want to change that to but. So now right here, all these are buts. But maybe we didn't cover all the clouds, right? So we had to change the strings too. So we need to change path.node, that value. We're going to do like a regex replace. Cool. And that's not all you can do. You can do something I never thought anyone would do. You can turn PHP into JavaScript. And you can test this out by going to our website, babeljs.io/php. There you go. All right, back to the slides. Cool. So you might be thinking, maybe I should just make my own compiler now. There's like a new JavaScript framework every week. Maybe we should make a new compiler every week too. But it's more than what meets the eye. The transform I showed, it only covered the one case of that BR tag. But how does it handle custom components, attributes, children, and all these edge cases? And I made this point just to say that it's really easy to make a transform from your own use case, but in reality, what Babel is figuring out all these edge cases from the spec. And I guess open source in general, we have this idea of what it is, but it's a lot more than that. It's a lot more than the code. So how does it work? How does Babel work as a open source project or community? I'm not going to talk about contributing as a new contributor. Max is going to go over that in a later talk. I'm going to talk about more of what is it like to be a maintainer. So one question that I have and a lot of people have is what does it mean to be successful in open source? I raised this question at the last talk I did. I think for a lot of us, maybe it means how many stars that we have, or how many contributors we have, how many releases. Maybe it's how many followers we have on Twitter on our account. Maybe it's how many downloads we have every month. Maybe it's all the companies that are using our project. But the metrics can hurt us. Every time we tweet out how many downloads we're having, all it does is build up hype, and we chase after all these numbers. It's just the success seen on the outside, but what's actually happening on the inside? What does it mean to have 20,000 stars, 9 million downloads a month, being used by Facebook and all these companies? People they assume Babel must be a company. I went to a conference and people were like, "Oh, so you work at Babel?" I was like, "No, it's not a company. It's just a project. It must be maintained by all these top companies, or you work at Facebook." And I was like, "No, I don't. It must have thousands of contributors. In order to contribute, you have to make the most perfect PR, and I'm gonna somehow be really mean and review and say that you did all these things wrong. It must be really complicated because it's used a lot, and the people that maintain this project must never make mistakes." So some things I'm learning as a maintainer: how to build character. Reading people's minds. Someone just joined the Slack room and they're like, just give me an error. I was like, what am I supposed to do with that? I don't know. Empathy. Making really hard decisions, like how to name a project. Took like a whole year for us to decide to change Babel to Babel Minify. Work less. People think that I'm a robot. Actually become a robot because I made my account automatically post an issue or a comment after every issue. Humility. I think the way I want to work on open source is to basically, it's a project that we can all contribute to, that I don't have to be proud of like what I'm doing, but like that anyone else can be involved, and that I don't have to remember that it was me. Like other people can do it too. I think it's almost like our job as maintainers to be replaceable. That the reason why a lot of us are suffering with burnout is because you feel like you're the only person that can work on something, and that if you like run away, that like this project will die. So I think it's about not thinking of yourself as less, not thinking of yourself as better than anyone, but just thinking about yourself less. And dealing with imposter syndrome. Maybe you look at an issue and you don't really know what to do with it, so you just put the shrug label on it. So nobody on the core team knew about like compilers or any of this stuff when they started contributing. We learned everything like working on the project, and even the creator of Babel, Sebastian, the only reason why he made that was to learn about compilers and ES6. So while you were working on any project, the amount of knowledge we think we don't know, it just increases. But we have to kind of just increase our ability to empathize with others. I think for a long time I felt like a maintainer, but I acted like a contributor. I would just do things that I thought were easy because I wasn't confident in what I was doing. I would like fix typos in the website, and I would never like fix or try to even look at the source code for anything that was a core thing. It's like I didn't think I could do it. And so one thing I'm learning is like how to have confidence. And I think a lot of that just means like being okay with making mistakes. So how does it work as a community? What's the future of JavaScript? I think this puts it really well. Yeah. Yeah. So, there's kind of like this missing link between the developers and TC39. TC39 is the committee that develops JavaScript, and I think maybe many of us, including me, maybe feel intimidated to want to contribute to the language. Maybe you feel like you're not smart enough or not know enough about programming or languages or JavaScript to contribute. And TC39, they really want feedback from developers on how they can better make the language to the whole broad audience of developers, the whole community. So I think that Babel is kind of like that middle glue that can combine the things that we want as developers and what TC39 wants as well. And what that means is before, TC39 would just come up with some proposal and then they would implement in the browser. It would cost lots of money, lots of time, and maybe the developers find out about it and they're like, why did we add this in the first place? But now that we have Babel and there's this staging process and a lot of people are using it, they can use that feedback. If we find out that it's not a good idea, then we can get rid of it and not have to keep it in the browser. If it is a good idea, but we use it and we find that there should be some changes, then we can give that feedback to the committee. A really good example of this is, or one issue that we have is decorators. So a lot of people want decorators, but who's been working on it since it's gotten to the next stage? Is it me? No, I'm not working on it. Is it Facebook? Is it Google? Is it library authors that needed like Angular and Ember? Is it TC39? No. Is it the community people that constantly talk about how decorators are awesome? No. It's Google Summer of Code. So we decided this year to, we want to reach out to people that aren't working on open source, and one way of doing that is by participating in these kinds of organizations. So we're also in Rails Go Summer of Code as well. And one of our interns, Peyush, he's working on decorators. And it's just kind of weird that we've wanted it for like 2 years, but then it took us joining a summer program for someone to make decorators like a reality. But it's been pretty awesome recently. I've been reaching out to a lot of companies, TC39 itself. I attended a meeting, and the only reason why I was there was because it was in New York, and so I just like walked over to Google. And so I was like just a guest. And recently a lot of TC39 members have been participating a lot more. So like in this PR, there's like 5 reviews. That's like crazy for an open source project. Normally it's like, I guess no review, right? You would just write the commit, or one person approves it, but like having all these reviewers is just really awesome to see. But the summer, it's almost over. What happens when it's over and then Paige can't work on it anymore? What happens for all the other syntax features that we want to do? What about the future? It's funny that this syntax was so like, wow, I was like, there's all these things that we're working on, and then we tweet out like this, a:\b, and then suddenly everyone's like freaking out about it. It's interesting that, and people are like, oh, can you backport this to the 6.x version? Like, please don't. So yeah, what happens when Babel dies? What happens when any project that we're relying on isn't there anymore? Are we just waiting for the maintainers to get bored, to get burnt out? Maintainers are just people too. We have lives, families, or kids, other hobbies. I think like open source being just unpaid volunteers, it hurts everybody, because it biases to people that have time, that are able to do those things in their free time. But I think what we want to do is think about how we can make open source work indistinguishable from regular work. Like when I tell people, like when they ask me like, what do? I say like, oh, I work 50% on open source and then 50% on like real work. The fact that I still have to say that, or I feel like I have to say that, means that I don't consider open source work like real work, when that is what I do. That's part of the job. So I think that we could do a better job of changing, I guess, the stereotype of what it means to be an open source maintainer or a contributor, that we should be doing it during work time. So what happens when I don't want to code anymore? Maybe I'll open a Korean barbecue restaurant. Yeah, code doesn't matter. People matter. We don't want just your code. We want you to get involved. You don't have to worry about doing it the right way. I have like literally no idea what I'm doing, but somehow I'm here. So yeah, I think it's just having your heart open and just not having to worry about like doing it the right way. Like I always felt like there's like a certain way to like maintain open source or contribute, and it's really just showing up. I think if you can find a project, doesn't have to be our project, that have people that are welcoming and willing to talk with you. Maybe it's one-on-one or at meetups. I think that's all you need to get involved. You don't need to come in with like all this knowledge about how anything works. It's just a curiosity and a passion for the vision of what that project is. Yeah, just no worries. You can ask those questions, listen, engage with the community, and you can fill in the gaps of what you want to do. When people ask like, how do I get started? I don't want to tell people like just go to like the issues, because you have no idea what the words that we're saying are. Right? It's just like a bunch of random, things that you have no context on. So I think it's best if, even though it's not really scalable, that we find like the things that you're interested in, and then work together to figure out how we can like build up the community. So yeah, just show up, things will happen. We'll walk with you. That we don't want you to just like go to the issues and then just like leave you on your own. I think the awesome thing about open source is that it is online, and you can just chat with people anywhere, but we kind of lose the human aspect of just being able to see someone face to face. And so maybe this is why conferences are great, and meetups too. In open source, we kind of just like, the way we interact with our users is like they make an issue and they complain, or they'll make an issue via Twitter or like Slack. But I think we should think about how to make open source more of a community, and we can learn a lot from other communities that are non-tech related as well. Yeah, that's all I had. Thanks.